Thanks, Patrick. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this regular meeting of Walpole Select Board, July 12th, and we're after 6:30, our posted time, so I call the meeting to order. Let's stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we decided to start a little bit early tonight because we want to devote some time to talk about ARPA money that we may allocate towards the old town hall, and we'll get into that discussion in a minute. But just by way of reminder and some quick setting of context, over the last couple of meetings, we have had department heads come in and talk about capital requests, and various committees and boards come in and talk about capital requests, which Jim has been pulling together. We have had the Compass people in last meeting to talk about not only the town hall, but also the middle school, the Johnson Middle School, and the high school. And as we came out of those sets of meetings, we realized that a few things. Number one, with town meeting coming up in the fall, we have to have a cadence of meetings that allows us to evaluate all the requests that are in front of us so that we can put together the proper town meeting request. And that's no small amount of work. We're planning on having some follow-on meetings on the middle school and on the high school with the school committee in a workshop session in the not-too-distant future, and then we'll have discussion here. But tonight what we want to do is talk about a very specific aspect of the ARPA request, which is around the old town hall, and very specifically some immediate repairs that need to be done to the old town hall in order to make sure that it doesn't deteriorate further in condition as we try to figure out the long-term question of what we're going to do with the town hall. So we're going to have a discussion about requesting $300,000 today from ARPA and directing Jim to request that from the county, assuming that the board agrees with that. And there are three real components to it, which, Jim, you could add to what I'm about to say. But we've got the Compass report that identified $221,500 in immediate repairs to stabilize the structure. Then we had a proposal from the Peregrine Group to help the town think about how to market the building. We've had a couple of RFPs that we've put out so far, and we've gotten 0 responses back on it. So we want to be a little more creative this time around and look at alternative mechanisms for us to go out to market and say, we've made these investments in the building, and we're now prepared to think about the optional uses, as follows. And so the Peregrine Group will help us think that through. And then we also have a capital budget request, which we're going to include in here for $12,000. There's an underground oil tank on the property, which is a matter of some concern, and we want to make sure that we address that so that we don't end up with a bigger problem on our hands over time than perhaps we already have. So, Jim, what would you add to that, if anything?
Just that the Compass report's pretty straightforward. That was presented at your last meeting. The Peregrine Group, that's somewhat new publicly into this board, but Patrick and I have been working with them since dating back to March 29th. At the time, they provided us with a proposal which would allow the town to work with the companies such as theirs to develop a strategy and marketing plan to reposition the building into an active use that reflects the town's goals. This company was referred to us by Compass, who we've been working with for some time on this and other projects. I think it would be a good move to market it and maybe get some insight into some other options that may be out there that we may not be aware of. So that's somewhat new, but again, we have somewhat of a history with this company for a few months, and just yesterday they got back to me and said they'd be willing to honor the price proposal they offered to us back this past spring, and we're looking forward to working with us. So that's about it. Don's here this evening, so we can address any specific questions about the building, but he's pretty confident in the figure to remove that underground oil tank that remains there.
Okay, good. So here's what how I'd like to proceed. I think the first part of the discussion should be focused on what we just talked about, which is the $300,000 and asking Jim to approach the county to release those funds to us so we can get going down that path. But I don't want it to end there, because I feel as though this is a topic that we have been discussing for, well, heck, I can think it goes back 20 years, that we've been talking about what we need to be doing with the town hall, even back when it was being used as a police station, and, you know, how do we continue to maintain it and so forth. So it's not a new topic by any means, and we've had multiple committees that looked at it. We most recently had a group that took a look at it a couple of years ago and came back with some suggestions, which became the basis for the RFPs that we've sent out, which again garnered nothing. I'm afraid that we're stuck in this sort of inertia spot right now, where we're just continuing to put money into the building, money into the building, money into the building every few years just to keep it, you know, from deteriorating. And what we really do need to do is, and I'm looking to this board to do it, is to get some real action done on the building this time around, so that we aren't talking about it 5 years from now and still, you know, sinking money into it. So let's start by talking about the ARPA request laid out in Jim's memo from July 8th, and see if the board has any questions for Jim or for Dawn or for others, and then we'll proceed into the second part of the conversation depending on the outcome of the first. So I'll open it up to board for questions or comments.
I'm more interested in talking about the direction of the building. I think the shoring up of the building and spending $300,000 to make immediately necessary repairs makes sense. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay. Any other comments?
Just an agreement, the $300,000 to secure the building and, you know, reduce any other damage is wise. I look forward to the discussions of what can we do with this building.
Mm-hmm. Ben?
Yeah, I would just add, you know, I think that 300,000, well, actually, let me take a step back. So the 221,000 that was in the Compass report covered all of the kind of building facade elements and the windows and sealing the roof and fixing a lot of the trim and all those other pieces. And that was what went into the 221. There was some portion of the oil tank in there, which, as we said, was going to be part of the capital budget anyway. There's around $20,000 for the development consultant, which I think is well needed. You covered that. I agree completely. I'd like to see also, because we are putting a little bit of extra contingency in there, I think it'd be a good idea to get the ball rolling on the structural, the structural inspection or structural review of the building, because we know what the next step ostensibly would be, and if we are going to spend money on a consultant, we want to be able to tell them the space can be this big, or it can't be this big because we can't make it, we can't take out these walls, or this is load bearing, this is structural or not. So I'd really like to see a part of that 300,000 be put towards that review, let's call it review and investigation from a structural standpoint, because I think that really then rounds out kind of this package of, okay, we work with Peregrine to develop what might be a bid or how we can put it out there, but it also gives us really also a very detailed view of what the interior of that building could or could not look like, or perhaps maybe there's option C, spend this much money and you can do something else. So I would really like to see that be a part of this effort, but I agree with everything else that's been said.
So on that, Jim, have we gotten any kind of a sense for what it would cost to do some kind of a structural review of the building?
I can go back to Compass and ask them to give me, Jerry, who was assigned that task, really got into that building a little bit deeper. Mm-hmm. I think we could certainly cover some, if not all of this, within that 300. Ben did mention, I did include a contingency in there, certainly.
Reasonable.
And I think we could try to cover that and work with them, along with the Peregrine group. So, yeah.
Okay.
And if necessary, I can come back and ask for a little bit more money.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so, Ben, I think it's a good add. It does give us a better understanding of what the options might be, given the understanding the structural, elements and where there may be structural weaknesses, and where that might either eliminate an option, or perhaps if you did this, you could add an option. So I like that idea a lot. So, any other thoughts before we move to a vote on the ARPA request?
Just one item, and Patrick reminded me, if we do a structural review, we would have to do a RFQ for architectural services because the cost of construction, we all know, is well over 300,000, and that's the threshold. But we can work with Compass to see what we could have them do.
Sure.
And if it comes in above and beyond, I'll come back to the board and say, listen, it's above that threshold. We're gonna do this RFQ. We'll get the numbers in, and we'll come to you with the firm number at hand if
Yeah.
needed.
At least then we'll know how much it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
All right, motion to direct the town administrator to submit a request to the county to release $300,000 of ARPA funds to address the Old Town Hall items identified in memo dated July 8th.
Second?
Could I just add a friendly amendment to that to say, and also an architectural review, which is called out specifically in the memo,
Seconded.
structural review, I think is the
Okay.
right way to say it, yeah, okay. Okay, I have a motion and a second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
400. Okay, so let's move on to the next part of the discussion. So we've just voted to spend $300,000 on the building. This isn't the first time that this board has voted to spend money on the building. And again, I want to make sure we're being real clear and really transparent about now what our next steps are going to be. It's going to take some time to do the work on the building. It's going to take some time to do the structural evaluation. It's going to take some time to put together an RFP, including the work that Paragon will be doing to help us. So over the months ahead, all of that will start to come together. But then, what do we do with that? So, again, I'll offer my thoughts, and I've said some of this already, but I'll repeat it just to be clear. So we need to break this cycle of inertia that we currently have around this building, which is we step up to it, we apply some money to it, we solve a short-term problem with the building, and 3 years later, we're back with something else, or 10 years later, we're back redoing the thing that we did 10 years before. And so when I say the cycle of inertia, that's what I'm referring to, is this just constant thing where we're putting money into the building and really not getting any value out of it. At least not any value that, is significant. I know we're using it for some minor, activities, but there's nothing significant going on in the building. This is an important building to the town. It's on the historic register. It's the oldest building in town. It's the first building in town, really, the old town meeting house. It's been used for many things over many years. It has real historic value to the town. So what I would be looking to do here is structure some kind of an approach through an RFP based on all those things we just talked about, including those in the RFP, and be open about alternatives. So while maintaining the historical nature of the building, and while, living within the confines of those various historic designations that have been applied to the building, and really wanting to maintain it as a, part of the soul of the town, if you will. But we also need to actually turn it into something useful while we do that, which means, in my mind, that we should be open to leasing the building, selling the building, entering into some kind of a public-private partnership that allows us to cause the building to become highly used and highly productive. When I say productive, what I mean is really two things. If we own it and we lease it, the lease has to cover the cost of operating the building. As the landlord, it'd be incumbent upon us. Well, of course, it would depend on the deal we struck with the lessor, but it would be incumbent upon us in all likelihood to maintain the building, which means that the lease structure would have to support the cost of the building, because we can't continue to just throw money into this building, at least in my mind. If we were to sell the building, then the building comes onto the tax rolls as a productive asset that way. And so either one of those outcomes, in my mind, again, as long as we're maintaining the historic nature of the building, either one of those are good outcomes in my mind. The bad outcome is the one where we just continue to throw money at it, which is what we've been doing. So again, I think the challenge to us as a board is to own that problem, own that decision, and move forward aggressively to come up with a real plan, one that we can get real costs behind, real benefits behind, and then figure out what the real right way to go forward is. This is going to take months. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. This is a process that will take months, and it's going to have to be well orchestrated and well thought out in order to meet the objectives that at least I see as important to this effort. So with that said, I'm going to open it up now to comments and discussion from the board to see what direction we ultimately want to go in. That's my view, but I'm one voice. So let's open it up for further discussion. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I don't have a lot to add, Jim. I think that what you just said covers the basis pretty well. I think we've talked about this a bunch, in the last couple of meetings. So I don't have anything further. I really want to see where we get with this 300,000 and those initiatives and some of those actions. So we'll see.
So with that said, would you say that the process is, so we take the 300,000, we start to execute on the 300,000 the way we've talked about it, but then an outcome is that we would put some kind of an RFP out there, one that has to be different from the other two. The other two got us nothing back. So are you in agreement with my view that says this should lead to an RFP some months down the road? We have a lot of work to do before you can get to the point of an RFP. But again, with an eye toward real action, not just we fixed the building and we threw the plan up on the shelf. We actually took it and did something with it.
Yeah, well, and so I guess that's what I would hope that spending money on the consultant, having Peregrine come in and give us advice on would yield, right? Is they might say, no, you really need to sell it, right? If you're serious about maintaining it and having somebody come in with the money. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's the end result. It seems like, and I don't know if this is maybe 6 months worth of work, maybe more. I mean, there's people that know that timeline, but at that point, then we'd be able to say yes. Either it's going to be an RFP or a sale or something along those lines. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and putting out a request for proposals doesn't cost us anything. It's something we've done before, but we also did it, I think in 2020 was when one of them went out. So clearly not a good time to be asking people to throw a lot of money, not knowing where the direction of COVID was going. So I think if we timed it better, and we also added some more flexibility in there, such as a public-private partnership. The possibility of the town being willing to step up and spending money on the building if a private contribution was involved as well. It could be a nice restaurant in there. It could be any number of things that work for on the commercial side and that work for us. And, if we're only looking to cover our costs, then I don't think we're asking for too much. And I think that somebody can go in there, again, weddings and restaurant and sort of like make it a lively sort of, vibrant place that makes money for somebody else and covers the town's costs. Yeah, there are options out there, and this is a good time to do it. That the economy could change, but right now I think if we could get something out there, we could see what kind of options are available. And so that's one option. Selling the building, again, to a responsible party is another option. Throwing good money after bad, I think, is your number one concern, if I'm reading you right. And you've been on the board in the 80s and the 90s.
90s.
90s. But you saw that
I'm
happening.
old, not that old.
You saw that happening, and you don't want to see it keep continuing to happen.
Yeah.
So I understand that, and I think I'd like to see what our options are. Hiring the Peregrine group to bring us down that path makes sense to me. Yeah.
Ally?
So agreement in all of those ideas. I think it does have to be, everything has to be on the table to make this building a viable building to be used and not to be vacant. To not continue to throw money into it, but have it, whether it be paying for its own way or making money for the town. Some communities have done like a Walpole Cultural Community Center. And if ideas for leasing or selling, I think that's an idea that we should also have in the back, because again, there are towns that are successful in having that sort of community cultural center committee that then lease it out for weddings, for bar mitzvahs, for events to be had. And I think as another separate segue to think about, I think we have to have all options on the table.
Thanks, Ally. Mark, I know you were joining
Yeah,
us.
sorry I was late. I do think that we should do the things we've talked about, stabilize the building, get it ready, take a look at what the options are. I think it's important to find out What does the building need to make it marketable in any scenario? And I think the answer is a few $1 million. So the question is, we really need to look at all the options. So where does the money come from to get a building like that converted into a successful use? And I think that we should be pushing hard to have a real look at what that means. So, opening up the basement and using it a couple of times a year is not a viable use. So, I'm open to any future use, within limits, that will put that building back into use. I'd probably prefer to see us own it, but I'm not against a good, private-public partnership. But I think the question is, where does the money come from? And some of it may have to be ours, and some of it may have to be a developer or some other person. But we should take a hard look at what kind of money is that gonna take. And I know I've had estimates to do different things, but, the 300,000 just stabilizes it for one more year. It doesn't really move us forward very much, so.
Okay. So, if I can try and just sort of wrap us up on this. So it sounds like we've got agreement that staying the course is not an option. We've got to come up with a creative and acceptable answer to move forward with some real productive use of this building while maintaining its historical culture. There have been a lot of interesting points raised here, all of which should be incorporated into the discussion as we work with Peregrine and others, and as we and I'm sure even well beyond that. But we need to be pushing hard on this and again trying to break this cycle of inertia. So I think, Jim, you've probably got what you need from the discussion here tonight. You've got, I think, a good sense for the way the board is thinking about this. You've got the ARPA vote already taken, and we should start moving forward with the other aspects. And what I'd like to do is make this some kind of a frequent agenda item, so that it doesn't just become one of those things that sort of we talk about, we have a lot of enthusiasm around it for this meeting, and then, it's a year and we don't talk about it between now and then. Yeah. So I think, on a quarterly basis, we should probably ought to be saying, well, where are we with this project? And then as we start to get, further down the path and getting into some real options, that we probably do something even, more frequently. But it'll take a little while to get this, what we've talked about tonight, moving, so probably quarterly is the next couple of quarters probably makes sense. But let's just make sure that we bring it back and talk about it. Okay?
Certainly, we can do that.
All right, good. Great discussion. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. So we're going to move on. We have our first appointment at 7 o'clock today to talk about, frankly, the work that's going on Main Street right now, and some traffic pattern adjustment that we need to make, given that the contractor is about to move from rebuilding one side of that bridge at North Street over to the other side. And there are implications for North Street that are going to require that the North Street, the access and egress to North Street from Route 1A is going to have to be shut down for a period of time while that work is underway. So we've had a lot of conversation, Jim, the fire chief, the police chief, others have been talking about how do we think about the traffic pattern, and we want to talk about that tonight, get feedback from the board and agree on an approach to go forward. And also make sure that we're starting to make the public aware that it's actually already happened. The North Street's actually already been shut down. But now there's a question of how do we handle the traffic and what do we do with Spear Street and Gill Street in particular. So, Jim, why don't I turn it over to you?
So here's where we're at right now. Jim, you're correct. I drove by there this afternoon. North Street is closed at the bottom of the road with some traffic backup there, but that's to be expected. No one loves the situation, but we all agree in the long term it's going to benefit the town of Walpole. It's just tough as we're right in the middle of it. So what's been done so far is Spear Ave is going to be a one-way road. That's been approved by MassDOT with our traffic management plan. And something that came up last week was whether or not to make Gill Street a one-way. The fire department's expressed some concern as far as the turning radius. If you're going towards Norwood, right at McDonald's there, taking that hard left turn, It's going to be a challenge for some of the larger apparatus, especially the tower truck and at times the engines also, to turn up there. So the fire chief, Tim's here this evening, he proposed making Gill Street a one-way road at this time, or after this, well, obviously we'd give some notice there, just to address that concern. Obviously, there's a telephone pole right there. It creates somewhat of a challenge for cars who want to turn right on Main Street going towards Rentham. So that's where we're at with this one. It's obviously a challenge. It looks like it's going to be, North Street's likely going to be closed for 9 to 12 months, according to MassDOT. They're hoping it'll be quicker, but he said at least through next spring. So that's where we're at. And as the road commissioners, I wanted the select board to kind of weigh in on this request, talk about it a little bit, hear from, I've asked DPW to be here tonight, police and fire, to kind of weigh out the pros and cons and ultimately make a decision as to, do you want to leave it as is for now, or address it immediately, or see how things go. I guess those are the three options on the table, so, at this time.
So, as I've looked at what you've provided us and what you've worked out among the chiefs and the DPW superintendent, I think the Spear Street answer is obvious. We should turn that into a one-way coming from North Street down toward Main Street. That makes all the sense in the world to me. I totally get the point, and I think the fire chief rightly has called out the tight turning radius from 1A onto Gill Street, and particularly as we think about things like the bigger fire trucks, the tower truck in particular. And so I think that you've rightly called that out as a concern. My question, and Chief, I'd be interested in your view on this, is would it be possible, or does it make sense for us to perhaps leave it two-way for a period of time, understanding that we're going to come back and re-look at it based on, what real experience we have? My concern is in turning that into a one-way street and this is from Main Street up to North Street would be the one-way direction. Coming, if you're going south on 1A, that works well. North is much more of a problem, number one. But really it's the coming down North Street, coming down Pemberton. It's all of those flows of traffic that are going to be coming into that area, and having Spear Street one way is one answer to that. You can see how that flow would work. One of the things that jumps out at me is that Spear Street is a fairly short street, and I would be a little concerned that you might get some big backups, particularly depending on how that construction's working. Because we get the backups on Main Street itself, so you could get some backups on Spear Street. Not having the second, egress route from the north side of town, I think might make that a tough situation. So, and I'm not a traffic expert by any sense, but as I look at it, I just wonder if maybe we ought to step into it and get some experience with leaving Gill Street two ways, get a sense for what that actually means for not only the fire department, for any big apparatus that needs to make that turn, and then come back and talk about it in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, once we've had some experience. And if it's really a problem, then enact the one way as you have suggested. And again, I think you're raising the exact right concern, Chief. I totally get it. I'm just a little bit worried about what other, it's the old law of unintended consequence, right? What else is now going to happen up on the north side of Main Street that's just going to become, really, really difficult, and maybe even make then the fire apparatus question even worse. So, I don't know, Chief, if you'd be, willing to think about that, or if you want to come up and talk about it, that'd be awesome. I'd appreciate it. And again, I think you are calling out the right issue here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to come up here tonight. As you said, I just wanted to make the board aware of the fact that North Street is our major route to North Walpole. Plain and simple. We don't use Gill Street normally for a response. We don't use Gould Street normally for a response to the North Walpole neighborhoods because of the school. We don't use Robbins Road because of the school. So that narrows down our opportunities for response. Fisher Street we can use, but again, good road until you get to North Street and take the left. Now you're on a cart path. Gill Street, for all intents and purposes, and the reason we don't use it, is a cart path. There's a pole that literally sits out on the street at the first curve with the apparatus responding up there. It's a concern of mine. I am willing to do whatever the board would like me to do. If you want to wait and see, which I have no problem with that approach. I just give you some numbers, though, of our responses to North Walpole. So far this year to date, 491 responses with fire apparatus to North Walpole. Last year, 980 responses. The year before, 920. So we are up there a lot. It's about a quarter of our responses to those locations. I think the queuing up problem, Ellen Spear Ave, is a legitimate concern. It's also a legitimate concern for Gill Street. I think you're going to have all those neighborhoods coming out. They're not going to go down by the school because you can't get out of Gould Street. You can't get out of Gill Street. North Street's closed. Even Robbins Road is, as if those that go that way to try to get out, taking the left in the mornings is a nightmare. Just trying to get out of the end of the street. So we'll be willing to work and do whatever we can. Obviously, our response mode is a little bit different with lights and siren. It's just the problem I have and the concern I have is where do the vehicles go when they can't get out of Gill and we can't make the swing. We'll use whatever methods we have. I've instructed my personnel I've actually put maps out last Friday. I've instructed all my personnel to become familiar with the best route to get to some of the neighborhoods, because getting to North Street via Robbins Road is not an easy task either for us with big fire trucks. You have to go north, Pemberton, Bowker, then to north. Same thing with the other areas that I've mentioned. Taking the hard left coming out of north at Gould, there's no visibility there, just like there's no visibility at Spear and North. There's no visibility there either coming out and taking the left. It's a little bit of a concern. And then you have what we call cutbacks. They're not clean 90-degree intersections. You go up and then you have to cut back to come back into it. So High Street presents the same problem. So we'll work with it, report back to you in a month or so if we continue to have concerns or issues. But the approach that you've presented is acceptable.
So that's good. A couple of things just to maybe think about is, East Walpole, at the station East Walpole, could it handle some of the?
So one of the other things that's happened is our response time on the road condition of Main Street currently is horrendous. And it is taking a tremendous toll on the fire apparatus, and it also takes a tremendous toll on our response. Our response time, so just as an example, if you were able to do 40 on the response mode, we're doing about 20 now. So that's slowing us down. The bridge, when it switches over, is actually going to become narrower than it is right now. These are all things that play into it. So yes, we've adjusted our responses to which engine goes from which station to certain areas. Like the Station 2 is taking a lot of the New Pond Village calls right now. One of the concerns you're going to have is once we start full depth and start from the Norwood line moving up, now that is impacted as well. So we're constantly shifting and moving things as we need to make our responses work, and we will continue to do so.
Is there any assistance that we could request out of Dover and Westwood?
So I have line box agreements in place already with the town of Westwood for one. Norwood, not so much on that end of town. They do come to New Pond Village for us, but Westwood helps us up in the northern part where our response times are a little bit challenging to begin with. I can extend them down. I've already talked to their chief. He's willing to come down further. So, we'll adjust as we need to. So.
Well, let me turn to the rest of the board. I've been sort of dominating the dialogue here, so let's open it up. Other questions or comments for the chief?
So if we make Gill Street one way, that's what you're proposing, how does that help you? It helps you with traffic, it eliminates traffic coming in the other direction, which would get in your way?
Correct.
Okay.
So what ends up happening is, because as I said, it's a cutback, when the cars are coming out of Gill Street to take a left, they're well out into the interstate. You can't take a left turn there.
Right.
And I took 50 pictures today that I could show you of 50 individual cars, and every one of them was out past, they're out at the third line. So it's a common problem. But we're not responding, you know, to your point, we're not responding, yes, 900 and something times a year, but it's not every hour on the hour. So
Right, yeah.
let's see how those responses shake out time-wise over the next month or so and see how they impact. And if it becomes something that I'm concerned about, more so than I already am, then I'll be back.
Are you still gonna use Gill Street just as much, or
We
you
are,
gonna?
because it's our route right now.
Yeah, that's the route.
That's probably our, for those neighborhoods in that area or up off of North Street, that is probably one of our best routes to get there, so.
Okay, and what's the big issue with making Gill Street a one-way? And I'm turning it this way because all three of you live in North Walpole. So is that gonna just totally corrupt the commute for people coming out of North Walpole? Or what's the impact with closing up that street?
So I see two things. One is, I'm fearful that Spear Ave is gonna back up.
Yeah.
If Gill Street remains two ways, that gives you an alternative to Spear Street to get out of there. If you make it one way, Spear Street is the only way, and I just think it's going to back up. And I have to deal with it a lot living in that part of town. So, and I actually intentionally drove down all of these streets today just to sort of get a good sense with now North Street shut down, and I went out Pemberton as well. Past Johnson, and I agree with that, left turn's brutal. And so, I don't think there's a good answer here, don't get me wrong. The right answer is get the doggone work done and get the street reopened, right? But my view is that backup on Spear Ave is one problem, but the second one really is the fact that it's gonna be very difficult for people to get out of the neighborhood. It's not even a neighborhood, that whole part of town, if you're coming south. And so while I get the oncoming traffic and especially the big fire apparatus trying to get by, and so I'm not disagreeing even a little bit with your point, but I just think I think it might cause a bigger problem than the one we're trying to solve is my worry.
Okay, my thought is just, as you have already said you will do, report back to us. Obviously, we're not ignoring the request if we don't make the change. If it's necessary, it's necessary, and if it causes some negative impacts for some other people, then so be it. But perhaps we'll just wait and see, and then that's my thought, and then we'll go from there.
I mean, the other thing right now, it's a little bit quieter because it is the summertime. Once school starts, and if we were to do that, and you start queuing up all the cars on Gould Street, I get your concern, so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
Is there something we
I
could?
wish that the project could honestly be done in a much quicker fashion for the bridge. I've seen it done in other places in the state on a weekend. I don't understand why it takes 9 to 12 months to do it here, but.
Yeah, and we're gonna keep pushing hard to shorten that period. Jim is in very close contact with MassDOT and the engineers there. So we're gonna be pushing that, because that's obviously that's the right answer, is get the doggone road reopened, right?
At least the bridge.
One thing to the police chief, Chief Kelleher, maybe one element to this needs to be some kind of traffic management using the police. Because we have to be very sensitive here, because, yeah, inconvenience is one thing, but we're talking about lives here. You know, what Tim's trying to deal with as our fire chief. So what I wonder if maybe, and particularly as we get more into the school season and all that, if maybe we should be coming up with a plan to have some police involvement there to just keep that street flowing.
Yeah. So since North Street has been closed as of Sunday night, our motorcycle officers have been down by Stella's to make sure that her business is accessible, but also people aren't using that parking lot to cut through. Same on Spear Ave, to make sure they know what's going on, a little awareness, more education for the public. And again, we've been assigning officers traffic posts as this goes along, because you're absolutely right. The traffic is tough down there, and the roadway's in tough shape. The job needs to get finished, but we're trying to manage as best we can. So yes, we can absolutely assign officers to those areas to assist as needed. We can put on awareness. We have a good following social media and awareness out on via Facebook of some sort, we can manage to let people know that, you know, these trucks are gonna be coming down Gill Street, you need to give them some space. And we can have officers down there to try to help that. You know, I think that might be a helpful thing. I understand the chief's concerns. I totally understand that, and I'm not opposed to his suggestion. I also share some concerns about pushing traffic to other parts of town, so.
Yeah.
But yes, we can absolutely get involved and manage this as best we can to ensure that things flow smoothly, as best as they can, given the situation.
So maybe at our next meeting, could we come back together? We'll have 2 weeks of experience. Let's talk about what we've learned. Maybe, you know, anything that, you know, the police could be doing to help out here. How's that working out? And at least let's get a pulse on it. We don't have to decide anything in a couple weeks. I think you need a little more experience in a couple weeks, but let's come back in 2 weeks and rehab this dialogue, okay?
Absolutely.
Any other comments from the board members?
Well, I just had another concern too. All of these streets are really difficult to make a left-hand turn, whether it's Spear, you know, Gould, Gill Street. And then once all the school buses come, are the school buses adjusting their routes?
So,
I'm assuming the school bus would have just as much difficulty getting down there, and how often are they using that street, and which are their alternative ways?
So when we had met on Thursday of last week, Lieutenant Becker actually went over and spoke with Conley Bus just to say, hey, here's what's going on, you know, are you guys gonna have an issue with this? Their response to us was, we'll adapt to whatever you need us to do. So we're confident that we can work with them on this and adjust routes as needed. Buses are big though, just like the fire trucks, so we have to figure out what's gonna work for them and what's not gonna work for them. So we've been in constant communication with them about what the future looks like for that area, so we'll work with them for sure about adjusting routes, and if buses can't get through there, then we'll have to manage that, you know, going forward towards the end of the summer and try to iron that out before we have a problem with school. The traffic will increase in September, there's no doubt about it.
Anybody else? Ben?
Yeah. So I guess just kind of zooming out maybe to 30,000 feet for a second and remembering that this, while it's our problem to make sure that the fire trucks and everybody can get through there properly, that this isn't a town project. And so what can the state do to, you know, help us out and to make things easier for us? And I know that Jim talks to them all the time, and both of you coordinate with them, as does the DPW. You know, initially they said that North Street was going to be closed for 6 months. That a couple weeks went by, now it's 9 months, possibly 12 months. So this is gonna be a long-term thing we're gonna have to deal with, and the state's gonna have to understand that if we have to move the traffic around, if there's additional details required, which is I think what you were getting at,
Yep.
that's something that the state's gotta do, right? And their maintenance of traffic guys and their engineers, they gotta get together and say, okay, we are gonna need 2 more people. Once school starts, maybe Gill Street is a pinch point, and they're like, hey, every day between 7 and 10, and they do it all the time, right? Contractors, the state, they know this stuff. So if we ever identify a pinch point like that, even in the morning or the evening, you know, we should definitely be letting them know and pushing them to supply that. The second thing I'd say is, you know, in my experience with maintenance of traffic and putting these together, I think a wait and see approach for a couple of weeks usually yields the best results. Seeing how it flows, seeing how the response times go, seeing what people do. You know, Chief, you said that you have the motorcycle officer down there. I saw the officer at Stella's. I also saw a car pull right past the road closed sign on Spear and go right up Spear and go to North Street about an hour later. So that does happen, and people got to get used to this, right? So if we were going to go to something, and this is kind of maybe to Glenn's point, Spear Ave is one way and the sign is there, but people are using it. And I was just down there, I go down there every day, right? And I saw 1. So I'm sure there must be 5, right? And we can't catch them all. So Gill Street is much longer, and it's a much more natural avenue for the traffic to go when you're coming from 1A. So if we were gonna go, my point is, if we were gonna go to this one way on both streets, the signage would have to be
Extensive.
extensive and way more informational. So instead of just having a road closed sign propped up against a barrel on Spear, which is there now, somebody looking to turn, not knowing where to go, can look right up there and see there's no construction, no nothing. So they just turn and go up. You know, you need to, they'll have to put in huge one-way signs and 2 North Street use Gill, right? With arrow, I mean, it's a whole thing. So when we do get back together in 2 weeks, it's gonna be like, hey, if it is an issue, we gotta do something, we should let the state know now and say, hey, we're gonna take 2 weeks to look at this, but you guys better be ready to jump if we have to make a change, because there's gonna be a lot that's required. And I would think they would. I mean, typically they're responsive, it seems like. So, That's my 2 cents on it. We just have to be as communicative with them as possible and hold their feet to the fire, so to speak, to make sure they're keeping up their end of the bargain. So,
You know, if you plan on education, maybe it makes sense to, in the early going, have a stronger police presence even at Spear Street. Because,
Absolutely.
you know, one of the things that's in my head is you got the mobile station there. I go there all the time. I come out and I go left on Spear Street because it's the easy way out, right? Well, you won't be able to do that now. And so to Ben's point, there's gonna have to be a signage right at the mobile station that's also saying, you gotta go this way, right?
There's been a significant amount of signage that's on order from the contractor
Good.
that'll be installed. I think it was a proposal I had sent you. There's do not enter signs going to the top of the street, the bottom of the street, arrow signs to mark the street very well. Right now, what's up there now is just temporary until
Yeah.
they can get those signs in. But there'll be more signage for that area coming up. But education is a big thing. Anytime you change a roadway like that, it's important that we, let people know what's going on down there. And it's not about enforcing laws and writing tickets and citations. It's about, hey, listen, this is what's going on now. You gotta be careful. There's people around. There's a lot of equipment. So that's kind of what our idea has been at this point, and it's gonna continue and pick up as this gets going.
and just one last thing, every time we have a meeting with them and everyone with the town that's involved in that, and I know they talk often, every time North Street closure is brought up, it should be brought up that that's how our fire trucks get to North Walpole, right? Every single time. That's how they get there. So every time the contractor says, I need another week, I need another no, that's how the fire trucks get to that entire part of town. So we just need to continue to remind them, because it'll be easy for them to forget, oh yeah, give them another week, give them another 2 weeks or whatever it is. That is really the crux of the issue for all of us, I think. So,
Great point. Mark?
Yeah, so I agree with what's been said. I think the left turn problem, getting on 1A going to Norwood is a huge problem. It's a problem right now. And I know that when the schools are in session and you have all the high school drivers and all the parents taking kids over to the high school, right at whatever time that is, 7:15. There were always 3 ways to get there. I guess you could go down by Johnson as well. Now we're gonna have 1 or 2. So we may need a detail officer there during those couple of hours to let people make that left turn. The same may be true later in the day when people are trying to get back to North Walpole. If you're coming down 1A going toward Norwood, and, we've really limited the choices people have to get back. So we may need to do that. That will also help. My fear is always when I sit on 1A and no one's moving in either direction. Then people do stupid things. So we gotta find a way to keep it moving. And a detail officer may be what we need to just shove people up when they need to take a turn. The other thing is, I know that they did a little top coating on Route 1A. It's still an embarrassment of a road. I don't think we can live much longer, certainly through the winter, without that road. Whatever they want to do, recoat it, grind it and coat it, they got to do something to that road for the winter, and I don't care how much they have to spend. That's part of the problem here, is it's so hard to go more than 15 or 20 miles an hour, that there's more people on that road for a longer period of time. And it is, it's taken a toll on, the town vehicles, but also people's vehicles, So we got to really push them hard to fix the road for the winter time. So last year was bad. Remember how they walked away from the road in the fall and as if it was not a big deal, so. But I'd love if we could pound them on that and, see what they can do for us, so.
We will. Carl's shaking his head.
Okay, so I'm gonna wrap us up here. I don't think we need to take a vote of any kind. I think you have what you need, and we'll come back together in a couple of weeks and see how we're faring, okay?
Absolutely.
Thanks very much for the input and for being here tonight to help guide the discussion. Thank you. Okay. All right, our next appointment is with the town clerk, Liz Gaffey. Hi, Liz. Talk about the Votes Act and some votes that we have to take.
Yes. Good to see you all this evening. The couple of things that I needed to speak to you about, one of them is the Council on Aging being our alternative polling location. So that's really part of a business continuity plan that I have in my office. If I came in on election day and there was a leak in the pipes, the power doesn't work, how am I gonna make this election still happen? So, under that ideal, we looked into having the Council on Aging, which is a beautiful building, looked at by the state. So I had the state come out on March 28th, and she reviewed from the Secretary of State's office, and she was there to ensure the compliance with the polling place with the accessibility for elderly and handicapped voting. So during the survey, they reviewed a number of issues, including site access, parking, entrance, and the building interior. So the Walpole Senior Center is fully compliant with the regulations governing accessibility of polling places. They were totally delighted with it, and the lighting in it they loved. So they have given their blessing on that being an alternative polling location, should we have a problem with one of the 3 that we currently have. So in a proactive way, I'm here in front of you tonight to make sure that, should I have an issue on one of these elections, that we do have Plan B. So I just need your vote that you'd accept the COA as an alternate polling location.
And I assume that we've had discussions with, the folks at the COA in terms of, let's say the leaky pipe thing happened, and, because this would probably happen on a relatively short notice.
Exactly.
Boom, we now need to take over the COA for the election as a place to go vote. There are other things that are going on within the building on any given
Right.
day. So have those conversations happened, or they will happen, so that we have a good plan that says, if indeed you had to pull the trigger on this, that, you could easily then move whatever is, or cancel or whatever, but communicate what's going
Or
on
put
to
out-
those
right.
affected? Yeah.
So that's conversations that can happen, but Kerry was part of the,
Okay.
the entourage that was there to check out the COA for an alternate polling location. So she was there that day, she understood it, and she helped answer the questions for the state about the location.
Okay.
So she's happy with it, but you're right, it would be a last-minute thing, and I'm sure there will be something going on, so.
Yeah.
And then it would also require, building maintenance to get
That's right.
all that equipment there. I do believe we have some in the pod that's located next door to the senior center. So it's kind of ready to go, but it doesn't matter. It would take a little bit, and we'd have to get that communication out there, even for the voters to go. So it's just to have, because right now, we have nothing.
Okay. All right, so we got 2 votes we're gonna have to take, but let's stay focused on part 1 first. So any questions for Liz on this part of it? Mark?
It's not a question, it's more of a comment.
Sure.
We have talked over the last few years about the Council on Aging being a potential voting site, so.
Right.
I'm not gonna say it was designed for that reason, but when it was designed, it was clear that it could be, so. It's not a new idea, so I'm in favor of it being a backup, so.
Right. I wish it was a little bigger, then we could really,
I wish it was
we could play
bigger,
some more
yeah.
games. Right, exactly. With
It's better than some of our current sites,
The-
if only it was bigger.
Exactly, yeah, if we have that. And maybe, that's something, just, throwing it out there, that we could do with one of the other buildings that we own at some point. Maybe we do find a bigger polling location with some of the other buildings, so I can say.
Okay, any other questions for Liz? Ally?
Nope. I make a motion to approve the Council of Aging as an alternative polling location.
Second.
And we need to do this by roll call vote, as I understand. So, Ally?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And Jim, yes. 5-0.
Thank you for that.
Okay,
That-
you've got a
that's
part
great.
B?
And Part B. Part B is just a little unusual. I did have a conversation with the Chief Kelleher. So the Votes Act, which I had given you information about, so they passed it on June 22nd. And one of the really unusual things that they decided to add or change for this is they're empowering you, the Select Board, in consultation with a registrar, which would be me, to make sure that we put detail officers in the polling locations. That's been something that the police chief has always been charged with and does. So I'm not sure why they wanted to take that power from there. But when I spoke with the state and asked them, they were like, you have to get in front of your select board before the September primary to make sure this happens, that the select board charges detail officers to be at the polling locations. So with that, I also asked, I go, can you, as a select board, add that to a description to the police chief? Because we don't know how those detail officers get their jobs. I'm sure there's a pecking order, there's an overtime list, there's the option for all of them. And without, trying to step on those toes, we need to just make sure that the polling locations are covered by the law, that we have a police officer there, and some of them do them in shifts. So I don't know how many we would have to do. That's something that he does take care of for us. So I asked if we could have the select board charge the police officer with, that's another one of his duty, the police chief as a duty, as you are his appointing authority, and you could add that to his job description per se. So I need you guys to vote to say that that's what we would do. So you, in conjunction with the police chief, will make sure that I do have detail officers at the polling locations on election days.
Okay, makes sense. Any questions? Okay, Ally?
Motion to authorize the chief of police in conjunction with the select board detail a sufficient number of police officers for each building that contain the polling place for one or more precincts at every election.
Second?
Motion and a second. This is also a roll call vote. Ally?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jim, yes, 5-0-0. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you. I
Appreciate it.
that.
Liz.
Okay, our next appointment is with the Director of Community and Economic Development, Patrick DeShane. He's going to give us an update on all the 40B things that are going on. Before you start, I wanted to comment on your write-up, which you provided to us in our packet. It was great. I mean, really, really great. Very thorough, I thought nicely, but concise. That's a trick, being thorough and concise, right? And I thought you hit everything that you needed to hit. I actually learned a lot by reading it, so I just wanted to comment and just thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the purpose behind the memo was obviously to be conscious of the time we have here tonight, but also provide you enough detail and background information for each case. So to start off, I suppose I could probably go through the status of each project that is before the town, starting with Cedar Edge, Cedar Crossing. So as many of you know,
Could you actually do it a little in reverse order?
Yeah.
You got the safe harbor on the back end.
Yeah.
In the note. Maybe let's talk about the safe harbor right up front,
Absolutely.
because that factors into some of the dialogue.
Yes.
Okay.
So, as many of you may know, when the Cedar Edge, Cedar Crossing project was initially approved via comprehensive permit back in April of '21, at that time we went through the process of recording those subsidized housing units. It was finally followed up. It was appealed. We went through the process of having a revised decision, and through that revised decision, we were able to re-record additional units that came about from that revised decision, and then go through the process of applying for the certification of our housing production plan. So not to go into too many details, but there's a bunch of different steps for how you can attain a safe harbor, both a 10-year safe harbor, I should say a 10% safe harbor, or a scaled safe harbor based upon meeting housing production plan goals. So we had met the later. So we had qualified for a 2-year safe harbor from DHCD through the process, and we were notified, I believe, in September 10th or so of 21 that our safe harbor period would last from April 26, 2021 until April 27th, 2023. This was effective from the original recording date of the comprehensive permit for the Summer Street project. So within that same letter, in the language I probably find right here. So within that initial letter from September 10th, there was language, please note that all units must retain eligibility for the subsidized housing inventory for the entire certification period. If the units are no longer eligible for inclusion in this on the subsidized housing inventory, they will be removed and will no longer be eligible for certification. This action may affect the term of your certification, and they've included the updated listing of our SHI units. So what that kind of relates back to is we received notification from DHCD on June 22nd of this year, effectively suspending our certification due to failure of what's called it'd be called the time lapse clause. It's a certain regulation within the DHCD's rules and regulation, which is 760 CMR 56.03. It's a bunch of thresholds that kind of kick in terms of where your subsidized housing unit inventory, how that's calculated and how you retain that. So because a year had passed from the date that the original comprehensive permit for Cedar Edge Cedar Crossing was recorded, that was the project that put us over the threshold to achieve the 2-year certification period. So once that year had passed, effectively, our subsidized housing units would be taken off the inventory. So when you're at subsidized housing units are off the inventory, they can only be reinstated once a building permit is pulled. And then once a building permit is pulled, then you have 18 months until a certificate of occupancy is also issued. So there's a bunch of different thresholds that the Department of Housing and Community Development kind of puts in there. So they've determined, because a year has passed, no building permits have issued, our subsidized housing units are, from that project, are temporarily removed, and our certification is suspended until the building permit is pulled. So effectively, right now, we are no longer within safe harbor, or the certification, the 2-year certification.
And just for the people who are listening, what are the implications of now not being in safe harbor?
You are effectively eligible for having additional 40B projects come forward. But I do want to stipulate that what that is basically a project that has already received what's known as a project eligibility letter. So it's not that the floodgates are open for any project to come in. We know which projects can come forward because they've already been issued a project eligibility letter, and that's a process where a developer would effectively work with a subsidized housing agency such as Mass Housing or DHCD to basically determine that their project is eligible to apply for a comprehensive permit. So it's almost a 2-step process. So right now we have 2 projects that are before the ZBA, where the ZBA invoked safe harbor after the April 26 period, where effectively our safe harbor was revoked. So I back up a little bit. So when we got the letter on June 22nd, it effectively, Walpole's certification is suspended as of April 26, 2022. So the 2 projects, Pinnacle Point and Darwin Commons, while the board invoked safe harbor correctly, the DHCD has determined that we did not meet the burden of proof because of the time lapse clause. And this kind of folds back into give an update on both those projects. So right now, we received notification that when the board invoked safe harbor for both those projects, they did so. I think Darwin was on May 25th, and Pinnacle was on June 1st. And so there's a whole provision once you go through the process of invoking safe harbor, the applicant has almost a rebuttal period for 15 days. They rebutted, they appealed our invocation of safe harbor, and then DHCD has a 30-day period where they issue their decision on that appeal. So effectively, as of July 7th, the DHCD issued their decision for both Pinnacle and Darwin, stating that town did not meet burden of proof, and effectively that our safe harbor invocation is not valid, so to speak. So what kicks in now, and this is a topic for the board next week actually, is a discussion of if they are to appeal that decision. There's a 20-day period from once you've received notification from DHCD where you can effectively appeal that. It's called I might get the wrong word, but it's an interlocutory appeal. So basically what happens is it would stay the regulatory clock. I know I'm saying a bunch of different things, but basically everything associated with 40Bs is very regimented in terms of certain time frames. So right now, when you open a public hearing, you have 180 days to close a public hearing unless you have an extension. So right now, for both Darwin and Pinnacle, that public hearing clock has been running. But if you to appeal DHCD's decision from this, you freeze that period. You freeze that clock from running, so to speak. So it's a lot of different aspects that the board is going to need to think about on this, for their upcoming meeting. And so both those projects, that's where both of those projects are currently. For a few of the other projects, just to kind of, I guess, go back into the memo and maybe start a little bit reverse of, projects that are currently, what should I say? So projects that are under litigation right now. So we have two projects, Diamond Hill Estates, also known as Doopy Street, that is under litigation. Right now, a little bit of background, effectively this project came forward, I believe, during COVID. So it's been kind of a long road. Eventually the board came to a conclusion last May, or should I say, what's the date on there? Last spring, where they denied the project. The applicant appealed. It was went to mediation. It was remanded to look at a specific issue. The board upheld their denial, and now it is in a joint conference period where they're determining a future court date for that project. So that's an 8-unit project. Only 2 units would be counted towards the SHI because it's a home ownership type of project. Burns Avenue, which is a very complicated, long history. Effectively, the current notice of project change was denied by the board on the grounds that the applicant did not provide substantial material when requested. This was a case that had been approved back in 2020 for 32 units. It was appealed by the applicant. I shouldn't say appealed really, but they would notice a project change by the applicant. There was a few things. Both they wanted to change the scope of the project, having a second point of access, increasing the unit count. There were a few other provisions where they wanted to modify conditions of their existing special permit, which were approved last year. A few of them were approved, some were not approved, but that was a minor topic. The notice of project change, though, the main turning point of going from 32 units to 40, that went through the process of opening up a new public hearing, and a lot of this was during COVID as well, so there's some delay in getting that project going. The applicant effectively did not want to pay peer review. The board ended up denying on that clause. I think some of you may have been around, and I think there was a portion where he appealed to the select board even on the issue. That strikes a bell. But board denied on that clause. It went to the Housing Appeals Committee. Housing Appeals Committee sided with the town and remanded the case back to the board. We opened it, and then effectively, as I mentioned before, the board ended up denying that because there was a lack of information provided. So right now, that is in a, both sides are basically working on scheduling a conference of council with the Housing Appeals Committee. There may be a possible new notice of project change. It's still within litigation, so there's some information that would probably be better presented by town council on that one. And the projects that are completed, Moose Hill condominiums, it was a small project that was approved last summer. 8 units, 2 of which are affordable. That is currently, they haven't gone forward and applied with anything yet. I think I had reached out maybe a couple months ago to see where they were at. No real timeline. So it's an interesting case where that's a project that's fairly small. There was no appeal, and they haven't gone forward and applied for a building permit yet. So it's been almost a year since that project was approved.
So they're in the same boat as the Summer Street
Correct.
projects. They'd come out of the.
Theoretically, yes. So those units, those subsidized housing units, if it hasn't been a year, DHCD can remove those units until a building permit is pulled. And then finally, Cedar Edge, Cedar Crossing, as you all know, the project proponents have not gone forward with applying for a building permit just yet. I know there has kind of been some rumblings. I think they may have had a discussion with the building department at some point about permitting and looking into permitting. So there's nothing currently, there's no building permit currently. So that's obviously the state why we're in the situation we are with the safe harbor being revoked. When I had spoken to the applicant months ago, he mentioned you know, so maybe fall or late summer. So, and that was just kind of an off-the-cuff conversation. So it's, unfortunately, a situation where that project has impacted other projects with regards to Safe Harbor.
Okay. Thank you. Discussion from the board. Ben? Yeah.
So because of the lapse in safe harbor now, we are open to receiving additional project eligibility letters.
So those can actually happen at any time. So even if we were at 10%, someone can go forward and file a PEL at their own, if they so wish to. So there's nothing preventing that.
So the only thing I'd add to that is, again, Patrick mentioned that the ZBA at their next meeting is set to meet with council, I believe, in executive, to
We're gonna
meet with
get
council to
executive
determine whether or not to appeal the state's ruling, but you'd be appealing the state's ruling to the state, so, to another state agency, it's DHC to the HAC, right?
DHCD, so you would appeal DHCD's ruling to the HAC, and HAC is a Housing Appeals Committee, which is a subcommittee of DHCD.
Right.
So, we're still a little bit in limbo, and we have 20 days to appeal it. Time's
Yeah.
ticking on that, and then they make their decision, so somewhat still in limbo, but, you know, it's up to the ZBA what to do.
Right, right. So to say that there's two steps to this process. One is the project eligibility part of the process, whereby they submit a letter and they go through and then they're approved to enter into the comprehensive permit portion of the process. right?
Correct, so
So the safe harbor is really what controls who can enter into the comprehensive permit portion of the process.
that's correct.
Right, okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
I think what's interesting to me is that affordability in housing is an important conversation that we should be having in Walpole. But you seem to have become an expert, you did a great job presenting today, on 40Bs specifically. So that specific way of getting affordability into communities, it's almost like forcing the affordability to come to Walpole because we haven't done it on our own. And I know we've gone down the path, and there are options to do it on our own, through our own zoning. And town meeting has not approved, I think, an inclusionary zoning bylaw. There are probably other ways to do it too, by encouraging affordable units in the downtown type area. So we're subject to these 40B projects because we haven't done it on our own. And I just wanted to point that out. You spent a long time, and probably a lot of your time here in Walpole working on 40Bs. There are towns that have community and economic development, your position, that don't have this problem, that you could spend your time on other things because they are at the 10% threshold. So I just wanted to point that out. There are, a lot of these projects from Pinnacle, my neighbors are affected by that project, and they are not happy with the fact that it's a lot of units in sort of a community neighborhood right up on the river, sort of in a way that isn't really good environmentally. It's not in keeping with the neighborhood. So we could go down the list of there are good affordable housing projects and there are bad, and some of these do not reach the threshold of good, in my opinion. So I just wanted there's a couple thoughts there about how one gets affordability into housing in a community, and Walpole is in a position where it's not in a great position in that sense. So.
Other comments?
Thank you for this write-up. This really caught me up to speed, I felt, and where we're at right now with our 40Bs. Cedar Edge. So now that we have these other projects that can kind of get themselves back in, that our safe harbor is revoked, if these projects go through, Cedar Edge keeps dragging, what is that number that we need to get to then, to get to that 10%?
So that's a little bit more complicated. So if Cedar Edge, in a hypothetical scenario, doesn't go forward, that drops us considerably. And we're also looking at the 2020 census numbers. So right now, we're at 9.82% off of the 2010 numbers. The 2020 census numbers, although they're out there, DHCD does a thing where basically they don't change the threshold until they've counted in what's known as like year-round units or part-time units. So if you're at the Cape, for example, there's a lot of rental units. So they're counted as a housing unit, but it's not a full year-round unit. So it doesn't really impact Walpole so as much, but we're still working with the 2010 numbers until the 2020 numbers come out. So, initially when we were looking at that, we're a lot closer, even with the 2020 numbers, just looking at our total housing units for the 2020 census numbers, we would have dropped probably a percentage point You know, but at the same time, it's kind of fluid if, you know, until, you know, Cedar Edge goes forward. That's certainly a big help for the numbers. You know, but we're still not there yet because of, you know, just the 2020 census impacting that.
And many of these projects have been discussed for a long time, and they have great impacts on neighborhoods. And, you know, I would like to see Walpole take more ownership of developing a more comprehensive plan to have affordable housing throughout the town. So we're still, with everything that's going on, we're a long ways away from being in safe harbor again.
I don't know if I could. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to be optimistic that I think, you know, it's not. I think we were pretty close before. Obviously, there's a setback, you know, when it comes to Cedar Edge, Cedar Crossing, whether that goes forward.
And I don't think that getting that safe harbor is the be-all, end-all, but I think it gives you that buffer that the town can start making those steps, that we would take ownership of it and plan for the future and hopefully have less impact of these 40Bs coming in front of us.
Absolutely.
So just to piggyback on what you had asked there, we are a long way off. Patrick and I, we were going through all this. We figured if the Summer Street Cedars Edge project went through, I think we came up with like 142, 150 units. Does that sound about right, Patrick?
Yeah, and so I do want to preface this with, I'll wait until DHCD gives the final numbers, but looking at the 2020
You're
census
going off
numbers,
of
going off of that, it was around
estimates.
10,042 new units for the town. And so that's how we kind of looked at what we had, what we needed to have after, you know, factoring in Cedar Edge, Cedar Crossing. And it was, you're like one big project away, or one marginal
Yeah.
sized project away from getting over 10%.
Right, which still, again, generally has a negative impact on a small area of town.
Yes.
And, you know, that's hard.
Thanks, Ally. Anybody else? Okay, again, thank you. This was
problem.
really great. Great write-up and nice recap, so thanks for being here.
Yeah, if there's any other questions, just feel free to reach out.
Jim, could I add one more thing?
Oh, sure.
All of the information that's in that memo is on the town website, right? And Patrick and the folk, or most of it.
It's all on,
most of
it's
it,
not
most
as
of
old,
it.
yeah.
So there's a huge amount of information on there that anybody can go and look up. It's under the 40B button. It's right on the front page. So anybody who has any questions or had trouble following what we were talking about here tonight can go there. And that's always available.
Yeah, my predecessor Ashley had started that, and it's probably one of the more, we've been keeping it up. It's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah,
None of
it
the towns
is.
have something that's detailed with everything there for their projects. So,
Yeah, thanks, Patrick.
Yep.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night. All right, well, after 7:35, the time for our open forum. Do we have anyone here for open forum tonight? Judy, step up to the platform.
I'm just coming in again to find out when the group is going to get together to talk about the repurposing of Johnson Middle School. Any plans?
Have we scheduled the meeting with the school committee yet?
No, we have not. I know they're in the midst of taking various summer vacations. But prior to this meeting, Bridget, I know, just got back from an extensive one, so wanted to give her some time to catch up, so we haven't set that date.
Okay. That was gonna be our next thing to do, was to get with the school
Right.
committee, because what we wanted to hear is what the compelling argument is to move the kindergarten into the Johnson. And that's one of the bigger ideas that is around on that topic.
But the group to call to the table is not going to happen until you hear from the school department?
My anticipation was that we would have that meeting with the school department in the pretty near future, so I think it makes sense to start there, because I'd like to hear what that rationale is, because depending on what I hear, you think one way or another way about what's available at the Johnson Middle School. So I thought it made sense to start there. Let's put it this way, we won't wait. If it's gonna take 3 weeks to get that meeting scheduled, Judy, we'll get the bigger meeting scheduled ahead of it, okay?
Okay. Because I just heard a lot about affordable housing, and that's something we can do for Walpole,
Yeah.
for the affordable housing thing. We take care of a lot of different groups, and the affordable housing area is always pushed back, as many of you just said, so. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Judy.
Thanks, Judy.
Okay, on to new business. DPW Director Rick Mattson here to talk about surplus vehicles. Rick?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You have before you a memo. Through our capital improvement plan, the town meeting authorized the purchase of 6 new vehicles. The 6 vehicles that were replaced are on the sheet that you have before you. I simply request that you declare them surplus so we can solicit bids to sell them.
Any questions for Rick?
Just remind me, where does that money go? Free cash?
Within the last 5 years, we went ahead and set up an account, a revolving fund, so we could actually sell them off instead of trading them in, which we were doing for many, many years. So the money that comes in, we set it up with a company who does an online auction for all these vehicles. They do them across the country for cities and towns. We sell them off, we get the funds, and that goes into our revolving fund, which has a balance of about 52,000. Is that in there, just from sale? Just from sales of mostly vehicles. Well, likely whenever the fire engines come in, which is going to be sometime, the 2 that we're getting rid of, that's likely the route we'll go with those 2.
Okay, got it.
We do far better under this process than trading them.
Good. The way we like it.
Okay, anything else? Ally?
Motion to approve the request of the DPW director to declare the 6 vehicles listed on the memo dated June 28, 2022 as surplus.
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay, next we have the Health Director, Melissa Ranieri, coming to talk to us about the DPW Public Health Excellence Grant Intermunicipal Agreement. Hello, Melissa.
Mr. Chairman, hi, members of board, thank you. So I'm here tonight, I did present a memo to the board. It is to ask the board to sign the intermunicipal agreement for a recently awarded Public Health Excellent Grant that we are working with in collaboration with 7 other communities in Norfolk County. We were awarded it this time last year, and now it's the formality of signing the IMA. We're excited. We work really great with the 7 other communities in Norfolk County. We'll be working with an epidemiologist to provide more surveillance for the community, and also working with community resource officers to provide where we have gaps in our services, and work to expand on public health.
Thank you. I read the document pretty closely, so I don't have a lot of questions, but I did have one for you.
Sure.
You had referenced meetings that said, when possible, the advisory board will host monthly meetings to discuss the effectiveness of regional shared services, allowing municipalities the opportunity to provide feedback, which I think is a great idea. And I was just kind of wondering what that venue would be. Will there be a separate meeting for that? Like, how will you actually
So
instruct
typically,
that?
we meet as a region, Norfolk County 8, we meet on a monthly basis.
Okay.
So that's something we would take place in our Norfolk County 8
Gotcha.
regional meeting. And then we also meet separately with our epidemiologists and our community resource officers as a region, but then also as cities and towns separately to see where the gaps are specific to Walpole. And then we would obviously collaborate, because potentially maybe something in, Needham that Walpole doesn't have might benefit Walpole, and vice versa. So it's nice to have that collaboration, and potentially maybe there's gaps in other communities that we could, assist with.
Yeah, I thought it was really good, a great way to get that kind of feedback. The only other question I had was on the standard contract. I see the start date is 7/1.
Yes.
And of course, we're past that date. Now, are there any implications for that?
No, there's no issue with that
Okay.
at all.
All right, great.
Thank you, though,
Thank
for
you.
asking.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
It's a good
Ally?
idea.
All right, we may make a motion to request, sorry, just lost my spot where I was. Motion to approve the request of the health director to sign a DPH Public Health Excellence Grant intermunicipal agreement.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. Thank you, Melissa. Great job.
Thanks, Melissa.
All right, let's see. Patrick, you want to come up for the next one for the Main Street Live request?
So this is, I believe, the 7th annual year that Main Street Live has run. Looking at having it this year, it's on September 16th, Friday, September 16th, same times from 5 to 11. Similar format as previous years. It's going to be food trucks, live music, Obviously looking for the one-day beer and wine license as well. The group that, the Main Street Live Subcommittee, which is a composite of the Economic Development Commission, they've done a great job. It's a well-oiled machine in terms of getting prep ready for this event. So I know it's pretty well received as well, so look forward to answering any questions.
It's a great event. I don't have any questions. Any questions for Patrick? Ally?
Motion to approve request of the EDC to use the town common for the Main Street Live event, close Elm Street between West and Main, a portion of West Street, and approve request for a one-day entertainment permit as part of the event.
Second?
Motion is second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. Thank you, Patrick.
And there's one more motion under that for the one day, the wine.
Yep, motion to approve request of Mark Romeo for a one-day wine and malt beverage license from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. as part of the Main Street Live event.
Second?
Motion is second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks, Patrick.
Okay, Walpole Porch Fest request. Ally?
Motion to approve request of Eric Hurwitz to use the town common for Walpole Porch Fest from 11 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. on July 24th, 2022, and approve request for a one-day entertainment permit as the town common, at the town common in several properties in Walpole.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. Destination downtown requests?
Motion to approve request of Destination Downtown to use the town common October 22nd, 2022 from 12 to 5 p.m. for Uncommon Art on the Common event and close Elm Street between Main and West and parking blocked along west between Front and Elm, subject to the applicant coordinating when necessary departments for the road closure and approval request for a one-day entertainment permit for the event.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. Our next one is regards Town Forest Committee membership, and what we've got here is a full-time member, Christine Whaleman, who wishes to remain on the committee but move from a full-time member to an associate. And we have an associate member, Matt Lunston, who has expressed an interest in being promoted to the full-time position. So, any questions on that from anyone? Hey, Ally?
Motion to accept the resignation of Christine Wellman as a full town forest committee member.
Second?
Motion and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500.
And then motion to promote Matthew Lunston to a full town forest committee member and appoint Christine Wellman as an associate member.
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. Next, we have a renewal of the stadium event parking lot license at 44 Water Street. Jim, anything to tell us about on this one?
No, everything was vetted.
Yeah, he was
Good.
just a little late in returning his renewal.
Okay. All right.
Have there been any issues with the parking for any of these permits for the stadium events?
Nothing.
Not as far as
nothing-
we've
yeah,
heard. I know the inspector's office has been out there, police have been keeping a close eye on it. No.
Any other questions? Okay. Accept a motion?
Motion to renew the stadium event parking lot license at 44 Water Street with 12 spaces.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. 500. Next is a request for Bike to the Beach for Autism.
Motion to approve request of Bike to the Beach for Autism to use town roads on Saturday, September 17th, 2022 for a charity cycling event.
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. And on to the consent agenda.
Motion to accept with gratitude the following donations. Multiple donors to the Night Before the 4th gift account in the amount of $1,430. And Great Blue Hill Sail and Power Squadron to Library gift account in the amount of $100.
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. And the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes of June 21st, 2022 as presented in our packet.
Second?
Motion and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. And that gets us through the agenda, so I think, Jim, we're on to your report.
Just a few items here. Borrowing, myself, Jody, I think Patrick's gonna join us, along with Lisa, our treasurer collector. Have a meeting tomorrow with our financial advisors, Hilltop Securities, to discuss the possibility of weighing our options of when to go out to borrow. for the remaining 27 to 28 million dollars for the middle school project. Obviously, if you've been tracking anything, inflation's through the roof. Interest rates are rising or have been rising for some time. They may have dipped a little bit, but we're keeping a close eye on it. I was advised on Friday that Marshfield went out to bid for a project that included about $6 million in water and sewer projects and just general overall projects similar to what we do. They came back with a 3.04% interest rate, and Andover just went out today with a $50 million project. Sounds similar to the school project we did. They came back with a low bid of 3.75% interest rate. So that's up significantly from I think we got back low twos when we did it earlier this year. So what I'd like to do is have Hilltop Securities come in here, just as we did months ago when we did the first round of borrowing, have Peter and Abby talk to you folks, ask Jody and Lisa to join us, and get some direction from the select board as to whether or not you'd like to go out to borrow sooner rather than later. That's what I know right now. I'll know a lot more after our discussion tomorrow. If we knew it was going to be coming in the next month or 6 months, we'd be millionaires right now, all of us. So it's more of just a judgment call. We got to listen to the people that have been advising us for some time now, and ultimately it's going to be your decision.
Real quick, if I can, and I have a lot of questions. I won't ask them all. I'll just ask this one. If we borrow now for money that we don't actually need for 18 months, we pay interest on it for 18
Yes, we
months.
do.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
that's something the board will have to weigh. So that's where we're at, but I just would like the board to listen to this, listen to what Peter has to say at your next meeting, and make a decision if you decide not to do nothing, and let's wait and see what happens after the bids come in November, December, and we can certainly do that. There's a risk either way, so that's that. Capital forms and capital budget update. Just a quick update. All the capital budgets have been, requests have been received. I am working my way through all the requests and figuring out what the department priorities are. If board members would like to see what the requests are, I'm more than happy to share that with you. Obviously, Jody is, we haven't closed out the books yet for FY22. She has a couple more days, 3 more days, to do that, so departments can get all their bills processed and everything, and then she'll start the whole process of certifying free cash and retained earnings. So it's a process, as you all know, but we'll get through it, and we are going to be ready to have capital budget start meeting in late August. Looking forward to that. Town meeting, the warrant closes on the 23rd of August. I'd like to propose that during your first meeting in August, the select board provide myself and the staff here with some direction as to where and when do you want to meet. Do you want to go back to this Monday meeting as it is identified in the charter, or do you want to go stick with the Saturday? I've talked to Dan briefly about it, and I said, I'd love to have you participate in the discussion. He was more than willing to do so. So just so we can plan and prepare as we're leading up to this, obviously, because we got to involve the school department booking everything, the chair company if we meet outside. So there's a lot of moving parts that we need to know ahead of time what you want to do. And when Dan took the poll at town meeting, we both agreed it was pretty much evenly split what to do. So it's going to be your decision. So if you're okay with that, we'll schedule that in there. 2 more items. Rec committee feasibility study. We're meeting with Weston and Sampson tomorrow. Myself, Brendan, Patrick, Lauren, some of the staff in here. Rick's going to join us to figure out, to listen to their final report. Here's where the priorities are. Obviously, the pools are going to be the most expensive item just to design it. I think their numbers came in at both pools just over $1.2 million to design on the pools. I think this report or presentation on the report is something that your board, along with the rec committee, should really hear and listen directly from Weston and Sampson, give you some opportunity, because there's a very large price tag associated with everything on there. And for planning purposes, we were successful back in 2008 when we did the Fields plan, and we used that plan even today. So we'll be looking for this plan for years to come, just in our capital planning process. So again, like to invite the rec committee in so they can join us, so that we can get everything done in one meeting. And last item is the 300th committee. I met with Bill, Katie, myself, Brendan, Patrick, and Lauren today, this evening, and they have a meeting second week in August, and they have a meeting the second week in September. What they'd like to do is come in before your board, your last meeting in September, provide you with an update, let you know where they're at. And they have some good events generally in the planning process right now. And we all discussed, let's by middle of September, final, have some, 4 or 5 good events secured. Let's get the venues booked, the vendors lined up. Patrick reached out to his counterpart in Norwood last week, and they've spent almost $600,000 in planning their 150th anniversary. I think the Boston Pops cost them about $300,000 to come in. So there's a lot of moving pieces there. And there's obviously, they submitted a capital request, which at this time, I think it's either 100 and 150 that's on the request for this year, so they could start to bank some of that money in addition to the 50,000 from last year. So if you guys are good with that, we'll have them in towards the end of September to start to get the word out and show you kind of here's the schedule of events that we tentatively have planned, because I'm most concerned with booking. If they are going to have a gala that's similar to a wedding we all agreed to today, you got to book that well in a year and well in advance. So that's where we're at. So.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad to hear that they'll be coming in at sometime in September, because it's interesting. It's 2024 sounds like it's a long way away, but it's not. Yeah. And so I think it is good to start hearing what they are thinking and give them our feedback and find out what it is they need to pull it all off and really do it right. It's a very big anniversary for the town, and it's something we need to do right. So
I agree.
Great. Any questions for Jim? Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye, 5-0. We are now adjourned. Patrick, thank you very much for Walpole Media putting us up tonight, and thanks everyone. And we'll be back in a couple weeks. Take care. Bye.
Boston Pops.